Welcome to the Pointy End. I'm Keith Sutherland. Today my guest is Ian Tulloch, political commentator. Welcome. Now it's post-election, but there's so much to talk about, particularly yesterday was Malcolm Turnbull's first anniversary of Prime Minister. Now we had Peter Credlin, Jeff Kennett saying they couldn't think of anything. Can you think of any stunning achievements that he's had over the last 12 months, firstly?
Morning, Keith. Well, he said personally winning the election by a single vote or a single member and a 3.3% increase in economic growth. But if you think about what the factors were in the increase in that growth, none of it can be attributed to anything that Malcolm Turnbull's government's done.
No, not for 12 months. You're not going to get growth in that period of time.
No, and it would have happened probably irregardless of government policy. But if you think back, if the 2014 budget had actually got through the Parliament, that level of growth would have been, I think, drastically reduced, because it was designed to cut billions and billions of dollars out of the economy. So if you reduce the level of activity in the economy, you're reducing economic activity, you're reducing the level of growth.
Is he really a dead man walking? Because all commentators say that, and you're one of the experts, but they're saying that 12 months' time, if he doesn't achieve something in the next 12 months, because we'll talk about the plebiscite, that's hardly likely to get up. There are a lot of other issues that are coming on at the moment that he just hasn't got a grasp of. He probably has a grasp of, but he hasn't got any power within the party.
I think his real problem is that he's almost controlled by the concessions that he made to the right wing of his party. And he's really reluctant, I think, to break that. I mean, I've said before that when Turnbull took over from Abbott, there was an opportunity for the real Malcolm to stand up. But he's been constrained, enormously constrained, by what seems to be deals made with the Conservative wing of the party not to try and bring him down. And I think that might lead to his demise down the track. But he's kicked no goals so far.
And the first week in Parliament too, day 3 was when they had the almost lost the vote, had to chase up politicians to come back, do this, do that. How does anyone sort of with control of the House of Representatives lose control of your numbers? How does that happen?
Well, they lost 3 procedural motions, and they almost lost a serious motion. People rushed back in. I think that was just laziness on behalf of the government whip and Christopher Pyne, leader of the government business in the House. I think it was just they didn't, and actually it was quite crafty tactics by the opposition, by the Labor Party. They had people stationed at the airport watching for people to leave before they brought these procedural motions on.
They sort of indicated on telly, I saw Tony Burke say, oh yeah, we didn't really know, we just, all of a sudden we realised, we did a count and they weren't there, but obviously there was a lot more to it than that.
It was well planned.
Yeah, it seemed to be. Talking about dysfunction, we had that obviously in the House of Representatives. How bad was the dysfunction in the Senate this week on Monday? Filibustering, and our local Victorian senator, who has her office in Bendigo, Senator Bridget McKenzie, forgetting person's name, what was happening on the lead up to the election. It was just the biggest joke and schmozzle I've ever seen, I think, on the Senate floor. It
was truly diabolical. I thought, I was watching it online and I thought, well, what's going on here? The problem was that the government was expecting to get a bill passed in the lower house so it could go up to the Senate to be debated. And it didn't get passed because the Labor Party stalled it. And so filibustering happened for more than half a day in the Senate. And you're right, man, the local National Party senator who's based here in Bendigo made a fool of herself.
And didn't go too well on Q&A that night, so she had a pretty bad day on all round. And for another person talking about his favourite TV program in the Senate, my God, what a joke. Now, talking about a joke, we've had some maiden speeches coming up yesterday. Well, not yesterday, all the way through since Parliament's resumed, of course. And we had the Malcolm Roberts the day before, and then And then yesterday we had Pauline Hanson and the Greens walk out. What's your assessment of perhaps the Greens walking out and perhaps her maiden speech in the Senate? Of course, she's already had a maiden speech in the House of Representatives.
I think the Greens walking out is probably more of the story than her saying, instead of what she did in her first speech, her maiden speech 20 years ago, saying Australia is swamped by Asians and now swamped by Muslims, which is complete nonsense.
Yeah.
And so I think the Greens tactically thought that the walkout might gazump her one argument, I think, in her speech. But I don't think it worked.
No, it's been a disaster. I turned the telly off. I was so sick of hearing about it this morning on television that it was all about Pauline Hanson. So she got greater coverage than anybody in their maiden speech, basically.
Yeah, and like Roberts the day before saying that Australia should exit from the United Nations is not just laughable. It's an indication of I think of the how can I put this of the lack of credibility that Pauline Hanson's team has, or at least two of them. We haven't heard from the other one yet.
No, the thing is that the way I see it with Malcolm Roberts is that he's going to be taking Pauline Hanson's oxygen, so there's going to be a falling out sooner or later, and it'll disintegrate like the Palmer Party because he wants the limelight, she wants the limelight, she's the leader, but I just think that the wheels are going to fall off the cart there.
Even when he was speaking, she was shaking her head and rolling her eyes as if, man, how could someone gazump me?
Yeah. I just mentioned briefly the plebiscite. Is that another issue? Okay, this is another Tony Abbott policy that satisfy the right wing and Conservatives of the party. But is this another thing that's really egg on Malcolm Turnbull's face, because that's going to go down? Bill Shorten's gone to Canada, but also suggested that they're going to vote against it. Is it that he just has no authority, and that's just another issue that's just going to fall apart? Same-sex marriage won't be debated in this term of government.
I watched him introduce the bill yesterday in Parliament, and he tried to rebut the three arguments, really, that the opposition and the Greens and Xenophon's team have put against it. That is, it's too costly. He said, well, what price democracy, which is, I mean, what sort of argument's that? Then about the potential for abuse to same-sex couples. He said, well, I hope people don't do that. That's not an argument. And then he said, well, about Parliament having the power to vote on it now, he said, well, we went to the election with a policy to take it to the people. Now, all of those arguments are just ridiculous, and I think he's really been caught here. What I think he should have done is stand up to the right wing in his party, bring the bill on, get it through the Parliament, and just move on, because this is now something which is extremely negative for his image, given that he argued for a parliamentary vote when this was debated in more than a year ago, when Abbott was the leader.
Yeah, no, it's a terrible situation, and I feel for the people that are wanting marriage equality, because it's just going to be put on the back burner, and on and on. The hate debate just continues. We'll change tact and get it off federal parliament for a while. And there's been 3 weeks ago the watershed election in Northern Territory, and who would have thought that in Northern Territory of all places, that of the cabinet we've got 8 cabinet ministers, 5 are ladies. Now that's got to be a watershed moment for the whole of the country. And as I said, I'm not being disparaging to Northern Territory, but it's a pretty blokey type of state. But to have 5 women, so obviously Michael Gunner has got confidence in these ladies, and obviously must be great performers.
I think this is a watershed moment in Australian politics, in political history in this country. Never before have we had this proportion of women in the cabinet. 62.5% of the cabinet is women. And if you think about it, the former Labor leader who stood as an independent, Delia Laurie, she lost by 55 votes. And a former deputy leader of the Labor Party lost by just 8 votes. If they had both won, there would have been a majority of women in the parliament, in the 25-seat parliament in Northern Territory. So this is watershed stuff. If you go back and have a look at history, it took a long time for the Northern Territory to even elect one woman, let alone almost a majority now. 12 of the 25 seats are now in the hands of female.
The other interesting thing
politicians.
out of all of that was that the country Liberal Party, 2 members, and even the leader has been lost his seat, of course, which was a seat that they've never lost. And so that the independents, 5 independents, have a greater majority. So do they become the opposition? Because with 2 people in the country Liberal Party, what happens to them? There's certainly can't be any party policy or status for them, surely.
Yeah, there is. They are the official opposition.
Okay.
The clerk of the Parliament has said that because the independents don't think alike.
No.
And so they can't really form a united bloc. So the CLP is the official opposition, although there's only 2 out of 25 there. And for Adam Giles to lose the seat of Breitling with a swing of 20% is incredibly damaging to the CLP. It'll be a long time before they recover from that, I think.
Yeah, well, they've gone downhill from the days of when Shane Stone, Bendigo boy, was the leader of them, and all of a sudden, it's just terrible to see that situation.
And even the deputy leader, who at one stage tried to stage another coup against Giles after he had staged a coup with the previous leader being overseas, he lost his seat too.
Yeah.
So it's just devastating for the CLP, and it shows disunity is absolute death in politics, and the Labor Party in the Northern Territory should be there for some considerable time now, if they can remain united.
Well, talking about unity, we'll come back finally to Victoria, because there seems to be a bit of disunity. The Jane Garrett situation, CFA won't go away. Herald Sun are really running a campaign against Premier Andrews, and it just doesn't seem to go. He's also had a few bad days in politics. I see his Chief of Staff has now resigned. No disrespect, it's time for him to move on, I dare say. Been with him for 10 years, but for someone that seemed invincible, now all of a sudden, the last couple of months, it's been a tough gig for him.
Yeah, I thought the CFA dispute was used by the Liberals in the federal campaign, but I don't think it had that much influence. But I think because it's lingering on for all this time, and still hasn't been resolved, of course, I think it is having some damage to the Andrews government, and the sooner they can clear this up and get back on track, the better. Because I noticed that they're trying to initiate policy after policy after policy to try and clear the air, but I think the CFA dispute is just hanging there in the background, and it's damaging them. And there's a fair bit of effort from sections of the Murdoch media that are continuing to drum this up.
Also, just whilst we're talking about Victoria, been interesting that obviously they don't have the numbers in the upper house, but there's been some real goings on there. That the member the person that's appointed to take over Damien Drumm's old seat of Northern Victoria still hasn't been installed. It's probably not the right word, but to get into the upper house, because one of the Labor Party people, there's questions on him. There's a lot of politics going on between the Liberal and Labor Party, and it just I don't know. And I saw the Sex Party came out yesterday talking about this is just ridiculous. They've got to resolve these issues, and so Northern Victoria doesn't have representation after Damien has gone. Until
the Labor person that was disqualified or sent out of the upper house comes back, and I think it was for a period of 6 months, and it's tit for tat. The Labor Party has said to the coalition parties that until that's resolved, the member that replaces Damien Drum won't be installed into the upper house. It's time for that to, I think, for that to be dealt with. I don't like that petty politics.
And that's what it just seems to be.
At all.
No. Well, Ian, as always, it's always fascinating to talk to you, because there's been so much happening, not just the last week, but since the election and before that. So lots of things. So thank you so much for appearing on the Pointy End today.
Thanks, Keith.